Want to stop juggling spreadsheets, calendars, and a dozen apps just to run your rentals? Logify makes it easy. It's an all-in-one toolkit for hosts. Build a direct booking website, automate guest messaging, and keep all your channels in sync. Running your rental business your way has never been simpler. And for Good Morning Hospitality listeners, you can get 20% off any yearly plan with code GMH20. Just check the link in the show notes to get started today.
Welcome to Good Morning Hospitality, your one-stop shop for the latest news, noteworthy trends, and thought-provoking discussions across the industry. From hotels and short-term rentals to all things travel and hospitality, you'll find each episode equips you with the information you need to start your week. Join us on Good Morning Hospitality every Tuesday, wherever you get your podcasts. Good morning, Sarah.
Good morning, Leo. How's it going?
I'm very well, my friend. Who have we got with us today? This is exciting.
It is exciting. We have a new face. We are joined today by Andy Finner, who is the CEO of STAA. That, for those of you who don't know, is the Short-Term Accommodation Association. And this is perfect timing because we have a couple of articles that I think Andy's going to have a really great perspective on today. So welcome, Andy.
Good morning. Hi, Sarah, and hi, Leo. Thank you for having me on the show.
Buddy, thanks for coming in. You and I talk endlessly about short-term rentals, so I'm pleased that we now get to put a microphone on it and get the wider community to hear.
Now, someone else is waffling. Good God.
Before we get into it, look, I've got to apologize. I'm in Stuttgart, Germany at the moment, which we all know, and it means that I'm sat in a short-term rental, a branded OTA short-term rental. I'll say no more. And there's building work going on outside. So this is all the joys of staying in a short-term rental live and happening. But I must say, Sarah, you'll be proud of me. How do you think I got to Stuttgart, Germany with the family?
Did you take a train, Leo? You love a train.
I took 3 trains, Sarah. And halfway through the 3rd train, I regretted it. And I wish I'd just...
Yeah, you thought, should have listened to Sarah and taken a flight. Yeah.
But Andy, although you're the CEO of the UK STAA, you're also a resident of, you're living in Holland at the moment, aren't you? So you must be all about the trains and all that.
Until June, yes, we had to come over here for a year. And I do sometimes take the train back and forth to London. It is, I wish it was a little easier. They reopened with great fanfare the direct train from Amsterdam to London in February, and on the 1st of March closed it again. So it's you struggle sometimes. I think my conscience for traveling is offset by most of my work is obviously done online, and I don't own a car. I have they call it a backfeet here. I have a cargo bike that I take all of my stuff around in. And I have a normal bike. So 99% of my journeys now are on a bike, which is great. And it's actually helping me. I don't need to spend quite as much money in the gym because my everyday travel is getting me fit. So it's a double win.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I guess we could. I don't think we're going to go down this route today because Sarah knows I love to talk about sustainable transport. But it's got to be easy. It's got to be convenient. It's got to be cost effective. Because, we spent an arm and a leg trying to be ethical on this journey by taking 3 trains versus the 90-minute flight that it would have been. But I love to hear about the cycling because I do think that makes a huge difference. And everyone knows that Holland has the most fantastic winters. So I imagine you were bone dry the entire winter, weren't you? Not a spot of rain, I'd imagine.
Yeah, sometimes it's a struggle. But as you say, it's got to be integrated. And I think that's one of the key things with STR tourism as well, that we've got to get transport integrated. I set up a glamping business in Monmouthshire in South Wales. And one of the things that we did there that really helped us get more customers in was make it easy that your biggest customer base for anybody in the UK is London. And no matter what we think about London, it's where most people live. So you need to make it easy for people to get there. And they could get the train over to Newport, but that would leave them 7 miles away from our venue. And getting transport in rural areas of the UK, as we all know who live there, is very difficult. So we ended up offering we did pickups from the train station to bring them to the venue. And we just factored that into our costing. It was great for us because we got more customers, and it was, environmentally it was great because there were less people driving. We didn't need to have such a big car park, but it got more business in. And that's part of, I think, what the whole transport system's got to be. You will use it if it's easy. If it's difficult, it's like flying to London. For me, from here to London City Airport, it takes 45 minutes. I was comparing last year, for instance, I went to Labour Party conference. When I go from my home in Brighton to Labour Party conference in Liverpool on the train, I have to go to London, tube, change, etc. It takes about 6 hours, and it costs me £180 to get to Liverpool from Amsterdam. It's a 45-minute flight on EasyJet. It costs £19. So how can it cost more money to get from Brighton and take 5 hours longer than it does from here? It's crazy, and it's a bigger issue than we can sort out in this world. But yes, somebody needs to sit down and actually have a sensible head and sort out our European transport system.
It's linked, isn't it, to what we're going to talk about soon. I won't step on Sarah's toes there, but this idea that you are competing. If you're trying to bring people to your short-term rentals around the UK, you're not just competing with other UK towns, you're competing with the convenience of flying to Spain. And that has to be established. Okay, gang, well, look, here we are. Sarah and I are very excited. We're going to be emceeing the main stage at the Short Stay Summit on April 2nd. Andy, we're so excited. If anyone hasn't got their ticket yet, although they'd be mad not to have it by now, why should they be coming to London? What's it all about?
Yeah. First of all, thank you to both of you for offering to be on the stage and do the emceeing. It's a big job. If anybody hasn't been to Short Stay Summit, I'm amazed at how big we've got it, how the people who come, people flying in from across the world to be there at an event that we organize. And it's still sometimes take a step back and it amazes me. I think, God, how have we done this? And it's not me, it's the whole team, Diane, you, etc., have done that. But yeah, what can you expect? A full day. It's full on. You're not going there to take some time out. It's busy, it's intense. We've got 2 large stages. About 1,200 people will be there through the day. Why should you go? You should go because it's going to help your business. I genuinely know that spending one day of your year going to the Short Stay Summit, whether you are a host with 1 property, a host with 10 properties, property manager, whoever you are, you go there. There are people like you who you can share ideas with, and just talking to people who have the same issues, the same concerns as you, and sharing those ideas is great. Listening to the speakers on stage, talking about your business and talking about the issues that you have in your business and how to find solutions around them is something that's so important for us. I know what it's like in the short-term rental world, that you look at tourism sites and they talk about room keys and things that don't apply to you because it's all for hotels. You sometimes feel that everything is not about your business. It's about hotels, it's about guest houses, or it's about long-term landlords, which we aren't. So this is the one day of the year where everything is about you, and everything that you're listening to is about your business. Whether you're a property manager or a host or whatever you are, this is your day. And please come, be there, support the industry. And I think the other thing that's really important for us is that the summit is the only non-profit event in the UK like this. Every penny, we don't make any money out of this. We're not going to go and take profit shares and go out partying afterwards. The money that we make from the Short Stay Summit goes straight back to the STAA. It is what funds our organization to keep fighting for the short-term rental industry. On the day before the summit, I've just had to change my diary and ask for some favors because I've been asked to go and talk to a couple of MPs about legislation on short-term rentals. The summit is helping us pay for that. We can't do that kind of work without being there. So yeah, please come. The money you're spending is helping our industry, and you being there is helping your business.
That's awesome, Andy. I think that's, for me, is what is so powerful about these events. I think so often we think as hosts and as individual operators, we are on our own little island because we operate maybe in a small area. And that sense of community is invaluable. Being able to share ideas and, hey, this happened to me and this is how I solved it. I see that all the time at conferences. And I think that for me is the most beautiful part. Yeah. And well done that you're finally getting some time in with people who can make decisions, and it's a good sign that they're willing to speak. They're willing to speak with you. They're willing to hear us out, and they're willing to take on different perspectives, because we say this all the time. So often this legislation that comes out, it's made with basically anecdotal evidence of, oh, some old lady can't pay her rent, and so it must be the Airbnbs. Well, not necessarily. There's so many other factors, and we talk about that all the time on the podcast, right? There's so many other factors for rising rents. There's free movement of people all throughout the EU. Barcelona, where I'm based, has a massive affordable housing crisis, but it's not short-term rentals. That's been pretty much proven by the European Commission. So it's really important that we have a voice in these things, and the work that you and the association are doing is really important. So thank you.
Yeah, we've got to keep the voice of our industry there and make sure. And it's hard work sometimes, and it's not just me. The whole STAA team is out there doing this. We've got to keep our voice in there because, as you say, there is no evidence to show our industry does anything. It may do, it may not do. We just don't know at the moment, because we've been asking the UK government to produce this registration scheme for over 7 years. We still haven't got one. There still isn't a registration scheme in place, despite our pushing and pushing and pushing. So yes, what we are doing is people are putting legislation through, suggesting that we're the cause of an issue without actually understanding it. I mean, to use a very flippant phrase, it's like we're passing legislation on the basis of a story from a bloke down the pub. It's based on nothing. How can you pass legislation that can affect the jobs of thousands and thousands of people across the country? Because it's not just a few people's houses that we're looking at. Yes, short-term rentals use houses, but that means that maybe we need to have a bigger conversation about how we use to call it the built environment, the buildings in our cities. How do we use, I go to the local town where my parents live. The Debenhams is still empty. Debenhams has been empty for years. Well, why can't that be turned into housing? Why can't, when I walk down the high street and I look at the empty shops that used to be, when I was a kid, I used to go into Our Price and things, and I remember they're empty. So we need to relook at how we use those buildings in our cities, maybe repurpose some of those shops to be housing units, put people back into our towns and cities and bring life into them. But we've got to stop this thing where we're saying, okay, rent's gone up in our city. Someone says there's lots of Airbnbs, because they always use the phrase Airbnb for our industry. It's their fault. Well, it's not. Airbnb doesn't own a single property in the UK, not one. Airbnb is merely a way to book into other people's properties, and those properties are there because there is a demand. And we have to recognize that tourism has changed. It's an evolving industry. When I was a kid, we used to go to places like, Pontins at Minehead, or Butlins at Minehead, rather. That doesn't exist anymore. These things change. People transition to going on holiday to Spain instead of staying in the UK. And places like Southend, Hastings, Margate, Ramsgate, they were bustling tourism resorts back in the day, and now they're suffering. And because tourism is an evolving thing, and tourism has evolved now into people want to stay in short-term rentals. If we try to legislate where people are going to go on holiday, they just won't go on holiday in the UK. They will go overseas because it costs you, you can go to Gatwick, you can get on an EasyJet, and I can be in Barcelona. I can be in wherever for under £100. And we've got to bear that in mind, that we cannot pass legislation to tell people where they should go on holiday. What we've got to do is look at how our industry affects the communities it's in positive and negative ways, because every industry has negative. Having a hotel in a town means that hotel could be a block of flats. That's a negative. We think the positive of that hotel outweighs it. Well, I think the positive of short-term rentals massively outweighs a hotel. Because when you stay in a short-term rental, you don't eat the food that's brought in from a mass catering company in the kitchen. You go to a local restaurant, you go to a local cafe, you go to a local shop. You're keeping people in jobs, not just in the short-term rental, but in that local community. And we've got to talk to these people and these politicians all the time about the positives of our industry, and that the positives outweigh any of the negatives. We bring jobs to areas that no one else would bring investment to.
And I like what you're saying. I think it's absolutely right. We have to remember we're competing with different parts of the world. So yeah, we need to be careful about how we legislate based off that. And I also liked, before we started the pod, you were talking about booking a nice holiday you've been on with some friends, and how you actually found the accommodation before you necessarily decided where you're going to stay, right? It was the house and the setup that allowed you to choose. We don't talk about that enough, do we? But we're obsessed with, okay, how do we get more tourists to come? Well, if they want to stay in a nice, beautiful house with the pool and all that sort of stuff, then that housing stock has to be available, right? Or they're just going to go elsewhere.
Yeah, I think that's a crucial thing that we've got to get legislatures to understand the buying decision that people go through when making that decision to go on holiday. We know that going on holidays is a discretionary purchase. You don't have to go on holiday. People go on holiday because they want to. Therefore they want to get what they want from it. Now, yes, as an example, last year, it was my birthday. Some friends of ours decided we wanted to go to a house with a swimming pool and go away on holiday together. There were 8 of us. And we then put into a major online platform, shall we say, the requirement that we had. And I didn't care if it was Northern Italy, Southern Italy, Spain, Greece, wherever it was. It needed to be near an airport so people could get there. And it needed to be sunny. And we ended up going to Italy. But that was because that happened to be where the venue was that we wanted. And when we're looking at things like the legislation we're passing in the UK, or trying to suggest, people are suggesting we're passing in the UK, is completely ignoring how people are looking at things. Yes, you will have instances where I want to go to Rome, I want to go to Paris, and they are must-go-to destinations. If you want to see the Eiffel Tower, you got to go to Paris. But so many of our other destinations aren't. If you're looking at, let's say, I've lived in Brighton for years. Leo, you're now in Brighton, so we know Brighton. So let's say we're looking at Brighton. Brighton is what it is, but it's a coastal city. If you wanted to go to Brighton and they didn't have the accommodation you want, you would still go, but you might well go to Bournemouth. You might well go somewhere else. We have to bear in mind that 30 years ago, 40 years ago, people used to go to Margate. They used to go to Ramsgate. They used to go to Hastings. They used to go to Eastbourne. They didn't adapt. They didn't change to what people were wanting. And now their tourism industries, okay, they're not what they were, and we're trying to work with them to get them better. But we've got to bear in mind that what we should be doing with legislation, what we should be looking at with short-term rentals, is not constantly penalizing our industry, but is saying, okay, look, the problem for over-tourism is short-term rentals. We can spread the benefits of tourism out to communities across the country. So the government should be working with us to help on this over-tourism thing, because we are the solution. And we should be looking at ways that we can increase bookings in places like Blackpool, in places like Southend, in places like Margate. Get more people in there in March, get more people in there in April. And that's what we should be doing. Because yes, we've got problems in some of the very vocal areas where people are talking about London, they're talking about York, they're talking about Bath. Well, the difference is, and we talked about this before, but the difference is in our coastal communities. They don't have jobs other than tourism. Tourism is a good quality career for people. It's not something you do if you can't get another job. I've done tourism most of my life, and I love doing it, and I wouldn't do anything else. Tourism is a good career, it's a good job, and we need to get out there and we need to support it with legislation. And that's why us, the STAA, are working with more than just short-term rentals, because we've got to get our place in the tourism map secured. We're not here for a couple of years and we're going to disappear again. We are an integral part of modern tourism. And what happens with tourism policy, what happens with Visit England, what happens with Visit Scotland, etc., is important to us. And that's why, if you come to the summit is supported by Visit England again this year, which is fantastic. We've got the main tourism board there. We've got the CEO of Visit Britain on the main stage, being interviewed by Graham from Sykes Cottages, talking about how us as an industry can get more from the wider tourism community. If there are hosts out there listening to this, when was the last time your local tourist board gave you any help or assistance? When was the last time your local tourist board did a campaign to bring people to your business? Probably never. That's what we're trying to ensure that we're doing. We need to get those tourism boards and people to help us. And we're really proud of the fact that they now are. Visit England have been supporting the summit for the last 2 years. Visit Scotland are sending speakers down to talk to us. And we're gaining that place that we need to get at the top table of UK tourism.
That's awesome, Andy. And I think it ties in pretty well with one of the articles that we had sort of flagged for discussion today, which is a report by Sykes Cottages using as well data from AirDNA in the absence of government data, as you mentioned, an unofficial registry. And this to me was extremely interesting. The report essentially cites that there are 3.5 times as many long-term empty houses in England than holiday lets. And I mean, those numbers to me are astonishing. You're looking at 212,500 short-term rentals compared with 719,500 long-term empty homes. You know, if we have a housing shortage, if we have a housing crisis, we're not focusing on the right things. We're really not. And I think we see this so often. We saw this in Barcelona as well when they put in, the ban over short-term rentals, and it was raised by the Short-Term Association and taken to the European Commission. And the European Commission issued a very similar report. It was basically saying, no, you guys are not building enough housing. I think in Spain, it was like less than 2% of the need was being met. Meanwhile, in France and in Holland, it was, over 30% of the need at least was being met in terms of new construction, new housing projects. So I think we have to get creative. And I think it's so much easier, unfortunately, to scapegoat short-term rentals and scapegoat, because there's one story where maybe one local person was pushed out, right? And it's, as you say, Andy, like, absolutely, there are some negatives to our industry. And I'm not doubting that there are times when, those unfortunate situations happen. But I think it's the exception more than the rule.
Yeah,
and I think the more data we look at, it just continues to prove that.
Yeah, I think that there is a fundamental problem, which is there is, I'm sure, housing shortages in areas that people really, really want to live in. But why do people not want to live outside of London in a lot of circumstances? Why are they not in these smaller towns, or that there's no desire to live in them? Is because there is a lack of services, there's a lack of economic opportunity, which is what Andy's talking about. We can actually help stimulate. Right? Because so I always go back to the mayor of Porto, right, who very, very smartly has decided that short-term holiday let licenses are only given out in neighborhoods that need it. So rundown neighborhoods that no one wants to live in, suddenly you let a load of tourists come in, and what happens? People open cool bars, restaurants, eateries, and the vibe comes. And all we've been saying through this entire episode is that it's through the prism of that. It's like, well, how do we get people to have a look at different parts of the UK? We went to Margate 15 months ago. We loved it. We managed to get into a short-term rental, really cute little cottage. Sadie, our daughter, loved it. The beach there is amazing. There's amazing tidal pools, phenomenal. And, and lovers of history, obviously, as Andy, you are as well. They love the fact that there's so much fallen splendor, because these Victorian towns would have been, before people started flying to the continent, these towns were just magnificent. So what you have there, amazing housing stock that can be converted back from the guest house, or can be just reborn. And if you do that, you become an advocate. I loved Margate, and we've suddenly become the biggest advocates for Margate ever. And we're talking about it, we're telling people about it, and that's what gets other people going. And also then people thinking, well, hold on a minute, I need to be in London one day a week. Why don't I move to Margate? Suddenly I'm picking up a really inexpensive house and I'm redeveloping it. And that can happen really quickly, but there's got to be something that sort of, the conversation has to be like, how can we help stimulate that? And short-term rentals are part of that solution, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. It's we've got to I think as a sector, we've got to be more, the last few years of press coverage of the way that politicians are talking about us, etc., has made us feel a bit, downbeat about the sector. And I think we've got to get back out there and realize that, I'm really proud of what we do as a sector. We've got to get out there and tell people what we do. We do bring real positives to communities. We are, as Sarah said, the legislation that's being passed is talked about is just based on nothing. There's no facts in there. There's nothing in there. We've got to get this registration scheme. We've got to get that in place. Find out how many short-term lets there are around the country. Look at how many people are relying on our sector for income and jobs, and look at the positives that we can do. We should be at a point now, and we're getting there slowly, but we are getting there, where the wider tourism scope is realizing that without our industry, all of those ancillary businesses, as you say, when we go to an area, restaurants open. Without us, the restaurants close, the cafes close, the beachfront shops close. And we've got to go back to, places. I know Margate. Well, I was in Margate swimming last summer in the sea. It's great. You've got to realize that, these places, these towns around our coast, they have a huge amount to offer. They became Victorian tourist resorts, not because the Victorians didn't think, right, let's go and find the most horrible places around the coast and make people go on holiday. They found the nicest places around the coast.
Yeah, it's true.
And they built these beautiful big buildings in them. One of my slight guilty pleasures that I probably shouldn't say on this channel was staying sometimes in Britannia hotels. Britannia hotels, I think, unfortunately, I think it does rank now as it's the worst hotel chain in the country, according to some things. It is what it is. But they also go and take these amazing Victorian buildings. I stay in the one in Liverpool for Labour Party conference, and the ballroom in this Britannia Hotel in the Adelphi in Liverpool is where they filmed some of the scenes for Titanic, the film, because it was built by White Star. So there are these historical things around our country, these things that these towns that we don't perhaps immediately think of as tourism places anymore, because it's not fashionable to go to them. They've got huge advantages, and this is what we're trying to do now. We're working with MPs like Chris Webb in Blackpool, like Bayer Lava in Southend. We're working with them to get these coastal communities and get people to recognise the real positives that they've got. If you live in London, if you live in East London, you don't need to go to Stansted Airport and fly to Barcelona on holiday. What you need to do is get on the train and go to Southend, because Southend is an amazing, vibrant city. It's got the longest pier in the UK. It's got facilities. It's got things. The Thames estuary is packed full of wildlife. You don't need to go miles away. Sometimes we've got to realise that actually on your doorstep are these amazing places that you can go to. If you live in Manchester, you don't need to go to Manchester Airport. Get on the train. Go to Blackpool. Go to more.
I actually think it's something that, Sarah, you tell me if I'm wrong, I think it's something that North Americans generally are much better at doing. They call it like the drive-to destinations, drive-to markets. Get out of the weekend, go. we need to remember that is our industry. Build nice, have nice short-term rentals so people can do that. Would you say that's fair, Sarah?
Oh. I think that's totally fair. And I think also what tends to work best in a lot of those kind of properties is something a little bit unique, something a little bit different, just like Andy was talking about, taking a really cool building and turning it into an attraction in and of itself. Most of these properties I've seen all kinds of, I don't know, my parents sent me a photo the other day. They went to the mountains in Tennessee and they stayed in a tree house, like who does that? But it was enough to make them drive an extra, 45 minutes rather than their normal spot, which is like a 3-hour drive away, which I think to most Europeans sounds crazy, but for Americans, it's normal. I think 3 hours is like great. And yeah, like they're driven by really cool destinations that are different. And it is ultimately the accommodation that's driving that, right? It's somebody has chosen to build an accommodation that caught their eye and nobody cares where it is. You're going there for the experience. So yeah, I like it.
Talking of experiences, Sarah, we can't not. We love doing this, don't we? Every week, we're definitely out of time. We're gonna get Will's gonna slap our wrist. We're gonna get told off. But come on, let's do it. So here we go. It's still Brian Chesky's flirting with all of us, telling us that experiences is coming. Sarah, tell us a little bit about this one.
Oh yeah, the classic. So, we love gossip and we hate secrets. Airbnb is finally starting to reveal some of the details around the relaunch of experiences. So they're putting out a massive campaign asking for submissions of new experiences. Part of this article that I thought was really interesting was basically one of the analysts in the recent earnings call was kind of battering Chesky a little bit, asking like, you've launched this before, why didn't it work last time? And so kind of his summary, which I don't know if I think it explains everything of why experiences was a bit of a fail. But he basically said it was hard to find. We didn't really merchandise it. It wasn't integrated with social media, which there I think they might have a point. And he's claiming they're rethinking the experiences. And also, according to him, they didn't market it that much, which I think is debatable.
Very debatable. Very debatable.
So if they didn't market it before, I don't know what the hell they're going to throw at it now, but let's see. So it's definitely clear from this announcement, Airbnb seems to be moving and transitioning more towards sort of the standard OTA model, which we've talked about a lot historically. I think it's a tough game to get into, right? We've talked about this so often on the pod, but you're competing with Booking.com, TripAdvisor, all of these others where they have a foothold. They've been doing this for years and years and years. And I don't know, for me, experiences, at least it aligns a little bit better with the Airbnb brand than maybe some of these other things like travel and I don't know. So I'm curious to see what they get into. But of the experiences, it does seem like they are open to maybe more of the traditional experiences. So one of the things that Brian Chesky mentioned was that he was opening an experience that is an Eiffel Tower visit with a twist. Whereas historically they were very, no, nothing typical. We only want unique experiences. And I think they also kind of missed the mark on that one, right? Like, you go to Paris, you want to see the Eiffel Tower. It's a moneymaker. And if you can do something that is unique and actually has a twist and it's worth paying for, then I think that's great, So let's see. Full details are going to be released in May. And until then, the rumor mill will continue to do its work.
Well, look, we have to do a full episode when it comes out because we've talked about it so much. I'm going to go back to what I always say. I think you're only interesting once, right? And generally speaking, you're only known for one thing. When I think like recommendations and advice and even booking experiences, I think TripAdvisor. And I think that the way people are searching using ChatGPT, Google Gemini means that that's also eating into the idea that Airbnb could be the go-to for experiences because people are just asking the AI agent like, oh, I'm in Paris, I'm in the Fourth, what can I do around here? And you're going to get that fed into you. So, unless there's a big investment in AI coming from Airbnb, it's interesting. I've got a new phone, I've got a new mobile, and I had to download Airbnb again onto my phone. And when I went on to the App Store, it said vacation rental and experiences platform. And I was like, oh, that's a stretch, isn't it? That's a bit of a stretch. Anyway, I'll take it. But I think that, all I'm seeing, I'm not debating that the co-hosting program has been a success. Like, well done. Like, I really, really think that has been a good success. Why has that been a success? Because it's so much in their wheelhouse. Like, it's what they do. They're bringing casual hosts and they're helping them kind of professionalize and get better at hosting. When he starts to look at these adjacent industries, which Chesky seems to be obsessed with doing, it's like, look at all these adjacent things that we can put the Airbnb business model all over. For me, then I do really start to question it again, especially with the sort of the arrival of AI. But yeah, cynical as I always am on this one slightly. Andy, bring us home. What do you think, buddy?
Airbnb experiences. I think I understand where they're heading with it. I think it's something that will only work in certain markets. I mean, if I think back to, I spent 15 years or so in South Africa tourism, and we built back in the mid 2000s a business model, which was, we had our accommodation facilities, and we realized that you can make a lot more money by actually treating the accommodation facility as a source of people to go on tours. But that was because in South Africa, people they had their set things they wanted to do. They want to go on safari. They want to go on a shark dive. They want to go, and there are a list of things of go-tos. And I think it depends where you are. I think that's going to be a more, not perhaps so relevant if you are going to stay, for instance, for a weekend in the Cotswolds, because that is what you're doing on your holiday. You're going for your weekend in the Cotswolds and you're going to walk around in Broadway or whatever. So I think it's something that will work in certain markets. I don't think it'll work in others. There's very little in tourism that is one size fits all, because everybody wants different things from their holidays. If I'm going away as a couple, I want a different thing to if I'm going away as a family. I think the key to making experiences work, which is what we did in our business in Cape Town years ago, is you have to make it easy. The moment you've got to make it so that if somebody sat at home in London, pushing the buttons on their computer, they can just book their trip. They know that someone's going to come and pick them up at 9 o'clock in the morning, do this, that, and the other with them. The moment you get involved in inquire now, send emails, ask for this, that, and the others, it's not going to work. And I think that was perhaps what I remember happening last time, that it became quite complicated with lots and lots of messages going back and forwards on the app. And you just have, when you book a holiday, you don't want it to be something you've got to overthink about. It's got to be easy. And if Airbnb make it so that this is easy, it's integrated, yeah, in certain markets, I think this could actually work for them. And I think the other key thing is that if experiences is going to work, you need to get the hosts or the property managers to buy into it. And therefore, hosts and property managers need to benefit from it. Because at the end of the day, Airbnb would probably disagree with me on this. As someone who was a short-term rental host, I think that customer's mine. They're coming to my place. They're booking through Airbnb, but they're my customer. So if they're coming to stay with me and they're then going to go on holiday, on tour or something else, I'm ultimately going to be the one who's going to go and knock on the door to remind them to get up. I'm going to be the one who's going to do lots of the logistics and smoothing all of those joints together that make an experience on holiday good. Well, yeah, we are in business here, and some of that income needs to pass back to the hosts.
Andy, I think that's a really good point. That's a really good point to leave it. We are so excited to see you, my friend, in a couple of weeks' time at the Short Stay Summit. So everyone, look, buy your tickets if you haven't already bought them. Andy, thanks so much for coming in and being part of it today. Yeah, it's been wonderful. We'll have you back for sure, guys. Guys at home listening, if you've enjoyed today, please find Andy on social media. He's on LinkedIn. Such a great font of knowledge of the industry, especially around the UK and Europe as well. But look, if you enjoyed today's show, please hit like, share, subscribe, and all the usual social places. And we'll see you again next week. Many thanks.
Want to stop juggling spreadsheets, calendars, and a dozen apps just to run your rentals? Logify makes it easy. It's an all-in-one toolkit for hosts. Build a direct booking website, automate guest messaging, and keep all your channels in sync. Running your rental business your way has never been simpler. And for Good Morning Hospitality listeners, you can get 20% off any yearly plan with code GMH20. Just check the link in the show notes to get started today.